Welcome back to Healing Mindset. I am Nazish, and today we are talking about something that so many people struggle with silently: money. Not the budgeting or spreadsheets, but the emotions, the stories, and the beliefs that shape how we experience money every single day. And tonight, I am joined by amazing Jennifer Edwards, a certified financial planner with advanced training in financial therapy and the trauma of money. She is the founder of Breakthrough Financial Wellness Consulting and the creator of the 7 layer financial wellness framework, through which she has helped the hundreds move from shame and confusion into clarity and calm. This isn't just going to be a conversation about finances, it is going to be a conversation about freedom. Jennifer, welcome to Healing Mindset. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm doing so well. Thank you, Nazish, for having me.
You're very welcome. So, Jennifer, the first thing that I'm going to ask, which I think a lot of people listening might relate to, you've seen hundreds of individuals with great incomes and even financial knowledge still feel stuck. In your experience, what's really at the core that emotional struggle with money?
Yes, that's a really good question because we know that financial stress actually pervades every layer of the economic strata. We know that it's especially acute for those who are in a state of poverty, mainly because the human body and the human brain want autonomy. We want to be able to make choices, and poverty robs people of the ability to make choices. And so that's why it's acutely damaging to be poverty stricken. It doesn't allow you for that autonomy in making choices. But when you move up from poverty into some kind of level of economic security, you have now some choices to make, right? And so that in and of itself also creates some stress because now you have options. I use the story of my parents. So when I was growing up, we really didn't have a whole lot of extra. We always had food on the table and a roof over our heads and a way to get around, but they weren't really high quality foods. Our cars were always, my dad would be fixing them in the front yard, that kind of thing. And my parents, when I got married to someone who was of a higher economic status, and and his family had some money that they could actually use to help their children out, their adult children, with education and, maybe a home down payment or things like that. And my mom always said, "Oh, I wish I could help you guys with, starting off in life, especially as a new couple, how difficult that can be financially." And then my husband's father would say things like, "Okay, I'm not sure what the best thing to do is here. If it's to actually give you money or to give you a loan or if it's to let you find your way." It created its own layer of stress to just be like, "What's the best way to help people here? Is it, how much do I give away? How much do I spend? How much do I help children out? How much do I let them kind of find their own way financially and grow that way?" So that has its own layer of stressors, especially one of the things that we see in very high net worth individuals. This is pretty common to get to a layer, to get to a level of having abundant resources, monetary resources. You usually have to have had a certain kind of focus, especially through the years of your career. So it's usually, maybe you have a business and so it's business growth. Or maybe you just have a regular job and you're doing a lot of saving to get to that point. And so you're kind of in this mindset of must save, must accumulate, must grow my wealth and resources. And when they get to the point where they have plenty, I mean, you go in and you meet with an advisor and they'll show you through a program, based on how much you want to live on, how long that would last. And, even taking into account all the different things that could happen in the market and, early death or late death or, a cancer diagnosis, long-term care. You can model in all of those, what we call stress testing. And And you can show them that they have plenty of money to last through basically any scenario, and still they find it often very difficult to spend those resources. And I attribute that to the kind of the scarcity mindset. Oftentimes, people who really focus on building wealth grew up in a situation where there weren't a whole lot of monetary resources. That's pretty common. And they're like, don't want to ever experience that again. It was very scary to not have the security of, food on the table or a home, or, parents always bickering about money. And so they're like, that'll never happen to me, right? And so they go out and they really conquer the world and create something amazing and save and work hard, and then they get to that point in later in life with where they have an abundance. And it's really hard to turn off that switch and to say it's okay to actually watch account balances go down, because they're used to watching them rise. They're used to seeing assets grow. They're used to seeing, their business increase in value. And then to suddenly have their net worth be shrinking, which it's supposed to do. You're supposed to use those assets to get through those later years in life. If retirement is your goal, it's really hard to switch that off. And oftentimes even people, any kind of person with a scarcity mindset, and this can be just from living in the economies that we live in, where scarcity is promoted. Scarcity is, that's basically the definition of an economic system, is the dissemination of scarce resources. So we're all kind of living in this scarcity mindset to some extent. And then some people with certain insecurities from their childhood might have it be even more pronounced. So that's just one of the ways why people kind of feel stuck, um, and how they kind of can't get out, because that really is ingrained in their nervous system that things are not safe. And they're using material wealth to try to gain back that feeling of safety.
That is such a compassionate way to understand financial pain. Like it's not just math problem, it is like human experience that we go through. And the way you talk about how our experiences, how our past shape us, what we do in future, it really makes a lot of sense. And tell me, was there a moment in your journey when you realized money struggles were rarely just about numbers?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So this happened when um I personally, like I said, I came from a background where there were not a whole lot of resources, and we wanted to either move or remodel our home. We'd been here for more than 20 years. Our kids had all grown up. We wanted to redefine the space. And the struggle that I came that I and I really had to treat myself in a trauma sense, to get to the point where I could feel okay spending money on things that, it wasn't absolutely crucial. We had a working kitchen, right? But to get to this place of, we're going to make it look nicer. We're going to have it be cleaner and more updated. And it really wasn't. I was not. A lot of people will remodel with the aim of being able to sell their house, and they just kind of need to fix it up to sell their house. But for me, it was like, I actually want to stay living here, and I want it to look really nice. I want it to reflect, the environment that I would like for it to be in. And yeah, I had to go through quite a bit to get there. And it took my husband even longer. Like, I had to just kind of say, this is happening and you're gonna have to live with it for a little while. I know it's gonna be hard. And then, eventually he saw all of the changes, and he was seeing, the excitement that I was experiencing, and it was easier for him to kind of come on board at that point. But that's just one example of many where it's like, oh, there's a lot more, because we had taken out a home equity loan at a very low interest rate. There was money to do this. It does increase the value of the house. So, there was that as well. Um, and it was a smart decision. There were no financial, it wasn't a bad thing to do financially, but yeah, emotionally it was like, ooh, can we spend tens of thousands of dollars? Is that even, yeah, on just like comfort? Hmm.
That is something very personal that you shared with us and our listeners, and that thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I hope many of us are gonna feel empowered with it and also maybe relate with what we might some people might be sharing similar experiences. And it is such a beautiful realization that like humanity that brings humanity into the financial space, something most people never get to feel. And like your seven life wellness framework goes way beyond behavior into culture, psychology, and even identity. Out of all those layers, which one do you think people overlook the most?
Well, I think that one of the things that we are not acknowledging enough is so there's kind of two extremes, and you talked about the behavioral and most people go to there's a behavioral problem like a self-control issue or education, so literacy, right? Like you don't even know, maybe you don't know the best course of action, or even though you know the best course of action, it's difficult for you to do it, so you need to establish a new habit. But there are two, think of that as kind of the meat of the sandwich, and there's still a couple of buns on the top and the bottom. And the societal layer addresses those systemic forces that keep inequities alive and make it difficult for certain groups of people to flourish, and and then make it easier for other groups to flourish. And so a lot of time, especially in America, we have this idea that it's the land of opportunity, and anybody who wants to work hard and has a good idea and is willing to take some risk could build wealth. But there are a lot of systemic factors that actually keep people from being able to do that. And so when people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I've just got into a ton of credit card debt and I just feel so bad," because they think it's just those two things. I should have known better and I should have been able to have more self-control. I first just say, "Hey, there are so many societal factors at work that made this that contributed to this thing happening, to you getting into to severe credit card debt, that that we have to acknowledge that so that we can then diminish the shame, because the shame is keeping us in the loop of poor decision making. Because once we're in shame, we're down here not feeling safe, not feeling good about ourselves, and we can't get into the good decision making creative space that would actually help us to get into a better financial position. So it's kind of like a downward spiral, right? Shame leads to poor decision making, and poor decision making leads to more shame, and shame leads to more poor decision making. So it kind of goes down like that. So that's always where I start, where I say, "Hey, this is not entirely your fault. In fact, it's pretty there's a lot of correlations between, almost everything that we do that we don't want to do can be traced back to unmet needs, lingering trauma from our childhood." And so I just try to help expand that, like, it's not just that you didn't know better, and it's not just that you don't have enough willpower. There's a lot of other things involved in how you got where you are.
That actually makes so much sense. It's like sometimes the layer we ignore is the very one that is shaping everything underneath. And when someone finally recognizes that layer, what shift do you usually see begin to happen?
Well, there's usually this aha moment, right? We explore there, and so I go through all 7 layers. I'll just list them off real quick. We talk about what their big money hangup is, usually what they're coming from, why they're coming and seeing me. It's either, debt, or, "Hey, we need a financial plan," or maybe a couple is not on the same page and they wanna get on the same page with their goals. And I run through, okay, well, let's look at all of the different factors that are involved here. And then we start at the root one. So I'll go from macro to micro here, just to give you a run through. That societal layer is at the top, all those systemic forces. This is where culture would lie. Relational is below that. So this is the family culture, right? So, you've got your bigger layer of society's cultures, and then your layer inside your family, the relational things that, you might have some very specific problems with being able to reach your goals because you've got some relational issues that need to be dealt with. And then it is educational. There's certain knowledge you just have to be able to succeed in the way that we do in them. United States. Then the behavioral layer. So yeah, you might need to establish a new habit. Then it's physiological. And this is my little nod to the fact that our spirits and our minds and our bodies are all intertwined. The easy example here is that don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. It's going to affect your decision making when you do that. But sleep, diet, exercise, all of those things affect your ability to um, do what you want to do and reach your goals financially, any kind of goals, actually. And then it's physiological, and then it's psychological. So this is the mindset part and the stories and narratives that we bring with us from childhood into adulthood that guide our financial decisions. All of those things where we're like, okay, we need to think differently about this. But then below that is the trauma layer. And most people don't understand that you don't treat trauma with talk therapy. And examining all of the bad things that you think happened in your childhood really isn't the best way to deal with trauma. You had a great episode recently with Natalie Bedard about trauma. So I encourage anybody who thinks that maybe trauma might be affecting their ability to be successful with money to go back and listen to that episode. I would just add a couple of things about she gives a nice long list of like start here, go here, go here, go here. I would throw into that looking for cues of safety. So the same things that babies look for to know that their world is safe, things like um, when somebody is talking soothingly to you, and also anytime that you see a smile, that is a cue of safety to a baby that this person is on my side. Any kind of hugging or holding. So, you think about what babies would need. Somebody doing something nice for you, right? Meeting a need. Make sure that you take the time to notice how that feels in your body and to scan for it, to just go, hey, here I am on a park bench. And when I smile at someone, they smile back. That's a cue of safety. That lets your nervous system know that the world is safe. Quiet and nature sounds would be included in that. Okay, so remind me of what your question was, Nazish.
My question was that when someone recognizes the layer, what
Yeah.
shift do they usually see begin happen to them?
Yeah, so usually when we run through all of those, they go, that's affecting it, and that's affecting it, and that I'd never thought of. And there's this aha moment, and then we start at the lowest layer. So it's usually at least some form of trauma treatment where we introduce mindfulness and we introduce like this is just nervous system settling. It's in the cells, it's not really in the mind. It's below the stories. And so usually we start integrating that right away. And they start to feel like, and so they start to feel like, okay, I can actually be in my body and be safe. And there are lots of different mechanisms to bring about this. You can do this with mindfulness and yoga. You can do this with meditation. You can do this with looking for cues for safety. We talk about the dorsal vagus nerve system and how that all leads to, you kind of got to go through layers there to get to a feeling of where you are safe in your body and your body goes, hey, I'm not constantly driven to scanning for danger and thinking that the next big bad thing is coming around the corner. So that's the very first thing. And once you start doing that, that affects every aspect of your life, not just your money. Obviously, this is why you have a whole podcast about it, right? Because it affects your health, it affects your relationships, it affects your ability to be productive at work. If you can calm that nervous system, we're really in an activated state on this planet with so many, and it's not physical dangers. Typically, it's emotional dangers. It's perceived pressure. It's the idea that if I don't do this, I might get fired. Right? That kind of lack of safety and security is what's getting us all activated. And again, being activated leads to poor decisions, and poor decisions leads to more stress, which leads to more poor decisions. So it's that downward cycle. And when we like Natalie said, it was great. She talked about, pulling yourself out and kind of giving yourself those times to breathe. The deep breathing really centers you, makes you embodied. And so they start to come back and go, especially before the things that were triggering before. So if it's a couple fighting, I say, get grounded, get centered before you talk about money. Don't do it the same way you've been doing it before. We need to interrupt that process. If it is, I typically eat out every night after work or grab takeout on my every night after work, then I say, use again those grounding techniques before you do that. Sometimes it'll keep you from making the poor choice and sometimes it won't, but you're making it mindfully. And so it usually diminishes the number of episodes where that would happen. And then we can talk about like, okay, what was really happening? Like, I mean, I make poor choices all the time, but now I'm making them more in a state of mindfulness, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know I'm kind of medicating with shopping. I get that. I know that that's what I'm doing. I'm depressed or I'm anxious or I'm sad about this or something, and I'm using this." It usually makes it so that it starts to happen less and less and less and starts to increase the amount of time between those episodes where we're doing what we don't wanna do or not doing what we know we should do.
That that shift sounds like a breakthrough that many of people don't see coming. But I feel like once it clicks, everything starts to change. It's like that just one moment where you can actually work, and it all gets better.
Yes, and one of the things that is really important is to continue having support through because it usually takes a good 6 months to interrupt a long-held belief or a long-held pattern, maybe even up to 2 years depending upon how ingrained that is. And so it's really important to not just have the and I love that you use the word breakthrough because that's right? We give people breakthroughs. We help lead them to a breakthrough. But we have that breakthrough moment. But again, our nervous system and our beliefs and our mindset, those are all unconscious and they're on automatic. And so we have
Mhm.
to continue to like, okay, maybe it's if you're a client of mine, you're texting, hey, I'm thinking about making this decision. Remind me why I don't want to do this, or you have a support group and we're supporting each other. We do group sessions as well and you get into a situation where maybe you're reaching out to an accountability partner and kind of disrupting that. But it's always working from that place of compassion of like how we got here is there's a lot more to it than just, I guess I'm no good with money.
That is a beautiful perspective towards everything, and the insights that you are sharing with us and our listeners. I'm pretty sure that is going to help a lot of us. So let's talk about couples for a moment. Money conversations can often get heated so fast, even in healthy relationships. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding couples have when they fight about money?
The biggest misunderstanding is really about motivation and why that's happening because money is kind of like it's like putting your identity on display for everybody to judge, right? If I redo my kitchen, then people automatically think, "Oh, that's one of her priorities," right? It's like something for and when they see what I did with my kitchen, then they'll be able to go, "Well, that was kinda dumb," or "I don't really like her color choice," or, "She spent how much money on this ugly looking thing," right? They can it puts it out there for people to judge and comment on, and, and that feels like a part of us. This happens all the time. You do it with your art and your work and your projects, and you do it with the things that you buy. And so it's really a vulnerable space to be in. And if couples don't have those communication skills in place and recognize that it's not mathematical, it's a very emotional, psychologically related topic. And so I need to treat this like I would treat it if somebody was, coming to me and telling me that they were a victim of abuse. Like, this is a sensitive thing. If I tell you I have this desire to, go on a vacation or there's an article of clothing that I'd like to buy or a new car that I'd like to get, I'm really opening myself up to these are my desires. This is who I am inside of what I want out of life. And it gives, even loving couples might disagree about like, well, why do you want that? And it kind of comes out that way, like, oh man, and we don't have unlimited resources. So that it requires collaboration and cooperation in trying to meet each other's needs. But the big breakthrough for couples happens when we start from the place of understanding. Oh, I get why you really like to have nice clothes and have your nails done all the time. When you were growing, your parents made it sound like the way that you presented yourself to the world was a reflection of your value as a human. Right? And maybe you still have to do it for a little while, but usually if your spouse starts to understand that, then you can start to make some, "Hey, what are actually my priorities? What are the things that are actually important to me?" And you're no longer guided by those beliefs that just followed you from childhood into adulthood that are typically not examined. They're not vetted. We're not deciding, "Hey, do I actually want to live this way? Is this really what's most important to me?" That's kind of a really important step. And then the other person has to understand, like, this can take time, and this is a vulnerable place to be. And so if you're like, she comes to, let's say it's a woman, she comes to the awareness that, hey, I don't really want to live this way anymore, but she still keeps coming home with expensive clothes and getting her nails done. The husband needs to, or the partner needs to acknowledge that this is because of an unmet need, and go into, like, how do I help her know that her value is so much greater than just, whether or not she's wearing designer clothes and whether or not she has, a brand new manicure every week. How do I help her know that I love her no matter what? And it can be, man, you look fabulous.
Yeah.
You look fabulous, and when you're not wearing your designer clothes, you look great in anything. Man, it just warms my heart to see you walk into the room because you're such a beautiful person. And maybe even pointing out things like, when we were at the store the other day and you held the door open for this elderly person who was in a wheelchair and they couldn't get over to the button to push it. I just felt so much love for you, just like you are just a being of light in my life. And I just wanted to tell you how much that made me feel so attracted to you, and so, you know, blessed to have you in my life, to have you be my partner. Messages like that will start to undo the belief system that they have in their head that their value is really only in, their physical appearance.
That is such a beautiful perspective, like turning these clashes into conversation and conflicts as an opportunity for connection, like rather than building up more tension. And the way you put it, it is just so beautiful. And I'm pretty sure that many of our listeners are going to benefit from this conversation. So, like for someone listening right now who wants to build a healthier money mindset, where do you encourage them to start internally? Like not strategy wise, but mindset wise.
Mhm. So mindset wise, I like to begin with a money beliefs inventory. And if you go to our website, Breakthrough Financial Wellness, into the resources section, you can download this as a free guide. And it helps you say, like, how do I finish this sentence about money? And you want to do this in a way where you just do it automatically. You don't actually think about it. You want it to reflect what's in your subconscious in that automatic system. And so you don't want to say, like, rich people always is one of them. Rich people always. And you don't want to think, oh, I don't want to say this because maybe I'll be judged by it. Just whatever first thought comes into your head, you write that down. And then we also have you rate how strongly you hold that belief. Because it's really not about the beliefs being unhealthy so much as being rigid about them. Especially because if you're rigid about a belief, then you don't have room for somebody else's perspective. And if you're in relation, which we all are in relationship with the people around us, you need to be flexible and be allowed to take on other people's points of view.
I love that the everything you mentioned is so beautiful, and I'm pretty sure that many of our listeners are going to benefit from that. So just one more thing, that if any of our listeners would want to connect with you, learn more about your work, or explore your 7-layer financial wellness framework, where can they connect with you?
The website's the best place. We're ramping up our social media campaigns, and so you'll be able to find us on all the major platforms here soon. But Breakthrough Financial Wellness all together, breakthroughfinancialwellness.com, and connect with us there. We'd love to have you join us in this journey of financial wellness.
definitely. I'm going to include all these links into the show notes, and I'm pretty sure that many of our listeners are going to connect with you. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for bringing such depth and compassion to a topic that often triggers fear and shame. Today's conversation reminds us that financial well being isn't just about strategies, it is about understanding ourselves with grace. And to everyone listening, if something resonated today, take it as an invitation to rethink your relationship with money, to question the old stories, and to step into the mindset rooted in clarity, peace, and empowerment. Until next time, I am Nazish, and this is Healing Mindset, where growth begins the moment we choose to look inwards.